What's going on, ladies and gents? Jake, aka Countdown Ended, coming to you today with a brand new series. That's right, Into Somewhere Rivalries, where we go ahead and talk about famous rivalries throughout the history of wrestling, current and past alike. And as you know, I'm not alone today. I'm joined by the one, the only, the man, myth, and legend himself, my other work husband, Cody Onidi 316. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Can't wait to get into this because this is an iconic rivalry that doesn't need a lot of matches to show how legendary these two guys are. And
Absolutely.
by these two guys, I mean me because, obviously I'm everybody, but that's a story for another date, maybe for a guilty, guilt-free episode,
Maybe indeed,
So-
and that'll be coming out this weekend. But in the here and now, we're talking about one of the hottest topics there is currently, heel John Cena and CM Punk. They're finally facing each other in opposite roles. We have Punk as the face, John Cena as the heel. Everything, cats and dogs, have switched. Everybody's upside down. We're in bizarro land. It does
Cats bark,
feel
dogs meow.
Exactly. But when we were doing the all the little bit of studying and references and all that for this episode, it was really kind of interesting to see how little they interacted. I mean, they had some incredibly storied matches throughout the history of both the WWE and everything that's transpiring today. But you look back and you say, hey, these guys, they've made such an impact with their rivalry on the business. I mean, his pipe bomb and then subsequent Money in the Bank match that we'll discuss was the first 5-star match that WWE had seen in a long, long time. I mean, this transcended the WWE bubble and went and caught wildfire to the general populace. CM Punk became the it guy because of this rivalry. So we're going to go back through and really see how, even though they only had a limited amount of matches and face-offs, it still ends up being one of the top rivalries discussed today. I know you've been very excited to delve into this one, my friend. And
Yes.
It's really funny to think that this all started way, way, way back at WrestleMania, and we had John Cena coming out as a gangster, and we noticed a fresh face, a young and wide-eyed CM Punk standing on the side of the mobsters' cars. He's holding a Tommy gun and helping Cena really get that mobster motif for his WrestleMania entrance. Wise fans such as myself who had been watching Ring of Honor, at this point in time, especially being in college when I went up there in 2005 and 06, Ring of Honor being online was a huge deal. People would gather around to watch that weekly, especially the events. It was something everybody chipped in for. So seeing CM Punk sign his WWE contract in the Ring of Honor ring as he turned heel on the fans there. And, this was one of the first emergences of him. So it was very cool for the fans that were in the know. Like, hey, this is awesome. Here's this guy's introduction. So we're going ahead and, we're starting kind of early with these two. But really, it wouldn't start until all the way back in 2009. At a Raw that happened to be November 23rd. And these two, would start their history here and then, go figure. So it was on this episode of Raw where John Cena defeated CM Punk. Just a straightforward episode, easy enough match, but it certainly made a statement. It showed that, CM Punk is at the level of where, John is in the main event. And it was also giving Punk the chance to really get his name out there, get away from the stank and stench that was the ECW
It was definitely
run.
working as well.
It was catching on. And we saw the straight edge, leader here for the straight edge society gimmick going strong at this point. And the way that he preached to the fans, he was a great heel and always a great counter to John's good guy motif. We say it a lot, the yin and the yang, the up to the down, but these two have always had parallels of greatness that shadowed against each other. They always had that mirror image of self, one light, one dark, but they were able to flip and further exemplify these roles through just excellent storytelling. And to think that this is where it started, a simple thing, a Raw match, but this was going to be one for the ages. And it ends up being just about a month later where John Cena is facing CM Punk once again. But this time there's a bit more stakes on the line. And we see that it's for the Superstar of the Year for 2009. And this is the tournament semifinals. John Cena going on to win. But we're again,
Of course,
we're
this
seeing
was during the era John Cena was, quote unquote burying, but like
he was
we
Super
already said
Cena
he was
here.
kind of
He was extremely
still free.
Super Cena, no doubt about it. And it was at this point in time where it was just it was basically Punk's way to turn the stench of what was before. He was almost released from the WWE, and Paul Heyman had stepped in and stuck his neck out and kept that from happening. And it was at that point where CM Punk climbed the ladder to success. He won Money in the Bank back-to-back years. He won the WWE Championship. He was at the top. And in between that time of 2011
Won a
comes in...
few world titles as well, right? World
Yeah,
heavyweight.
absolutely, with the Money in the Bank. And now here comes John Cena. So the fans are extremely excited to see what this is. And basically the way they had them get certain stances at this role, it turned into being the pro versus anti-establishment. CM Punk seemed like the rebel, the guy that wanted to antagonize the good guys and anger WWE management. And the fans really loved the dichotomy and the dynamic between the two. And they were into CM Punk. Naturally, organically, he got over. And their matches were maybe not the greatest of all time, but they certainly were some of the best going on in TV at that point in time. And of course, it all leads to Money in the Bank. But at this point in time, it's seeing how Cena... as Super Cena as he is, he's giving Punk a chance. He's giving Punk an option here, and it's like I said, when they started out in late 2010, we had them going against each other with the new Nexus, where Cena basically spent the entire summer trying to take down the Nexus. That was initially, Wade Barrett's Nexus. But when they eventually overthrown him as the leader, it was the Second City Saint himself, CM Punk, that came in and attempted to lead them to new heights. And although they didn't last long, his leadership certainly, again, with the Straight Edge Society thing, it just turned him into a bigger star. And seeing what they were able to accomplish with Punk at this point in time was a bit of lightning in a bottle. It was magic. The fans... they wanted to boo him, but then they also wanted to cheer him. He was great on the mic. He had a ton of charisma. And then in the opposite, you've got John Cena, the company guy, the one the company picked, the people's champ that wasn't chosen by the people. It was a very interesting story to tell, and one that was a bit, bit nerve-wracking at times too, because you weren't sure how it was going to play out. So as we said, they had their first matches, and two of them in 2009, one for the Superstar of the Year tournament in December. Then in June 7th to be exact, 2010. So anniversary, 15 years of that going just by. That's where we see the Straight Edge and Nexus leader with his mask on after being forced to shave his head and whatnot. But we get Punk out there taking on John Cena. And then we get into... basically the new Nexus being banned from ringside with their match in January. And that would basically really start to pick up the intensity of their rivalry. We would see them...
because before he joined the new Nexus, he was doing commentary, right? Like,
yes.
I think something pissed CM Punk off while he was on commentary. I forgot exactly what.
Got him a little bit of the ire to come out there and really go ahead and be nasty. So he got to come unhinged on the mic.
Yep. So
Absolutely.
Wade Barrett got the boot from the Nexus, and then...
yeah, Wade Barrett got sent out, and here we are. As I said before, it's the start of it. We got January 17th. It doesn't seem like it's going to be much, but we end up just, CM Punk defeats John Cena via DQ in their singles match there. And eventually the Nexus gets disbanded and sent to slaughter. But really what everybody's here for, and like I said, at this time, we've had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 matches of theirs so far. So a decent amount over the course of 3 years, 29, 10, and 11. So 3 so far in 2011 and 1 and 2 in the years before. Not as many as you would expect to see for those going back and forth. And John was usually the victor, unless there was some shenanigans where they had to go ahead and, go back through and tell a different type of story. It was John defeating Punk time and time again. Unless, CM Punk was winning by DQ, that's all there was to it. Really, though, what resonates with everyone and what people really get excited for is the Money in the Bank angle. And I feel like this best exemplifies what Punk is known for and what him and John's big rivalry comes down to. It's been exciting to see them at Money in the Bank, having this be the chance for them to go ahead and, really.
This is where it really took off.
Yeah, this is where they set the company, into this really hot, over exciting time. And basically what it came down to is that in a non-title match on the June 13th episode of Raw, so Punk defeats Cena, and basically it was a distraction from R-Truth that got him the win. But
wait, this was in 2011 before the Money in the Bank match?
Right before, building up
this
to
is another thing that went on in the Vince McMahon era. Like they would phase multiple times before the pay-per-view match.
Exactly. So we saw Punk become the number 1 contender. He won a triple threat Falls Count Anywhere match against Alberto Del Rio and Rey Mysterio on the June 20th episode of Raw. And after that, Punk revealed that his WWE contract would expire at midnight on July 17th. And he said he's vowing to win the title, leave the company with it, and be gone. And it was that very next week on Raw where Punk cost Cena a tables match with R-Truth that he then delivered the infamous pipe bomb. And that's really what made their rivalry so explosive. And
this is what turned CM Punk into a babyface.
Exactly. He's going ahead and he's having the time of times.
Because this is what really just got CM Punk cheered no matter what, I think. And
oh, absolutely.
CM Punk didn't he when he returned after Money, do you say he was a babyface then, or was he still healing it up?
He was still healing it up, but the fans were so beside him. So what it was is he spoke the truth in a time where everybody's promos were absolutely 110% scripted, when everyone's words weren't their own. It just felt like Vince McMahon was using everyone as a puppet to convey his thoughts. We finally got some realism.
The only thing that could go off script is the whole reacting to a crowd chant. You can
but there was very minimal breaking the fourth wall or acknowledging smart fans or any of those tropes that we see commonly used and overused, you could even say today.
This is why their mic battles were good as well, because Cena and Punk could just say whatever.
They were allowed to get down and dirty. They brought out the realism in it. And that's why when you and I had discussed previously in other podcasts and episodes, you had the largest crowd in attendance for AEW for their All-In show, but yet all anyone can talk about is CM Punk brawling with Jack Perry. Same thing with Brawl Out. So, we can give multiple examples. Why? Because it's real. It's not a scripted story angle. They really hate each other. There's real bad blood. And being able to use that and turn it into an angle eventually.
Lives were in danger.
Yeah, they were. being able to use that and turn it into an angle where you can make money off of it is typically the goal, and they weren't able into AEW. But with WWE, you saw Punk legitimately have issues and complaints and things that he thought deserved criticism, and no one was willing to speak up. Vince was surrounded by ass-kissing yes men, and he said, you know, I want you to, John, while you lay there as uncomfortable as you can be, getting put through the table, he's like, before I leave in 3 weeks with your title, there's a lot of things I want to get off my chest. And obviously, he's like, I like you more than a lot of people in the back do. I hate the idea that you're the best. You're not. I'm the best in the world. And that's where the best in the world really took off for Punk here. He said, the only thing you're better at is kissing Vince's ass. And then he goes on to say, you know, I don't know if you're as good as Dwayne, though, as ass kissing. Same with Hulk. That's when he says, oh, I'm breaking the fourth wall, and waves to the camera. He talks about being a Paul Heyman guy, talks about Vince's imaginary brass rings. And he's like, no matter how many times I prove it, you know, it's never enough. He's like, I don't get to be in movies. I'm not on the poster of WrestleMania. I'm not on Conan O'Brien. And this isn't sour grapes, but the fact that Dwayne is in the main event at WrestleMania next year and I'm not makes me sick. And you know what? It still stands true today. He brought up Colt Cabana, and he brought up McMahon being, you know, after he's dead, his idiotic daughter and doofus son-in-law are going to run this company into the ground. And I don't know if Punk is wrong. I mean, that pipe bomb transcended, as I've said several times throughout this episode, but it is true. It surpassed the wrestling world and went into the mainstream consciousness because it was so unexpected and unbelievable, impossible to fathom that Vince would allow anyone to say these real fourth wall breaking
The only funny thing
negative
about
things.
that pipe bomb, though, is the only funny thing about that pipe bomb, though, is like he was saying Triple H would run the pipe bomb into the ground, but under a Triple H reign, WWE is when he decided to return to the company. Just
yeah, I know, but I mean, with how things are right now, with the negative fan, you know, mindset around TKO, it's not you know, the worst thing yet. So it could always get worse, and I think that's part of the problem. But this all leads to CM Punk. He defeats John Cena in what would be their first 5-star match in the WWE. Not just John and Punk's, but in general. They had not been given a 5-star match by Meltzer in many, many, many years. So this broke the mold for that. We'd see them face off again at SummerSlam 2011, where Punk would defeat John Cena, but then would be cashed in on by Alberto Del Rio. You know, and Punk managed to, even when he lost the title, to still make it about himself. And what happened there? Oh, it was Kevin Nash attacking CM Punk after the best in the world defeats John Cena at SummerSlam, and that's what allowed Del Rio to cash in. Now, with the superpower of hindsight, we know how terrible this angle played out, and Kevin Nash ended up facing Triple H, not Punk. It all kind of just fizzled and fell apart faster than it could have been explained. It wasn't a great angle, but Punk was able to take it and still use it to, even though it delayed his rise, he still used it and utilized it to rise his stock within the company. So the straight edge superstar, he bounced back and ended up getting the title again not long from now, where we see him both between the Night of Champions 2012, when we finally get that rematch there, and that, you know, leads to Punk being champion again. And, you know, it's a real interesting point in time for how we get to this point. So throughout 2011, Punk has the belt. At the end of it, he gets the belt back. And then from there, like I said, he's got to go ahead and he's got to basically go through the gauntlet while retaining this title for a record-breaking 434 days. Truly
great,
nuts.
by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So
that was one of the longer title reigns in modern history at that time, I believe, because before then all the titles were like hot potato kind of thing. So this was actually the first lengthy title reign, correct me if I'm wrong, that they had.
Yes, yes. In many, many, many years, everything else had been short, and that's what made this title reign so stellar, exemplary. What made it work even better? So, it is just a bunch of moments, opportunities, and things like that that came together and really just worked. I like I said, the undeniable chemistry, the the kudos to one another that they like working with each other. He's like, I think John was stoked. He didn't have to be the guy directing traffic when he worked with me. He let me do whatever the F I wanted to. And it's also that we work together really well, and it shows, so there's
Yep.
certainly a lot for them to be into and
See,
proud of here.
CM Punk's one of those guys that always defends John Cena. I think when it comes to like the burying aspect and stuff, he's like, well, I've never had a problem with him. So
Exactly. Yeah. No, you're not wrong there, certainly. And that was one of the things that kind of, forever followed and really tainted Punk at that point in time, was that he was always trying to prove that he was good enough. As where Cena was given the benefit of the doubt, he wasn't. He was basically forced to scratch, claw, dive, and manipulate his way through every spot. He had some great rivalries throughout this time too, and Punk was really just making a bigger and bigger name for himself. I I feel like at this point in time, we got quite a few things, and like I said, CM Punk at the 2012 Night of Champions taking on Cena. CM Punk defeats a WWE champion, and he defends it. So he defeats Cena, and he's still going ahead and retains his title.
This is where a little streak where CM Punk was getting his comeuppance on Cena, right? He was defeating Cena over and over, right? This was a little streak they had going on.
Yes, because Punk, and this is where they know. Punk. So at this time, Punk is champion still. He's on his heel run of the century. He's got his 400+ day title reign still under his belt. And he had the knee injury that he was forced to work through, which was unfortunate, but he comes back a bit sooner, and he knows that The Rock on, episode 1000, where we saw John Cena, basically get betrayed by Punk, and that's when Punk turned heel. And on The Rock that night, Cena and Punk had a match on that show on Raw 1000.
Remember that, for sure.
And seeing the way they faced then, it they've always had stellar matches. They always had top-notch facings.
Raw 1000, that's where Cena failed his cash in, right? Because he wanted to.
Yes. So Cena at this point in time basically makes it known that he is just going to go ahead and he's going to cash in his title, but he's doing it ahead of time. And he's saying that I am going to go ahead and be the first man to call my shot ahead of time. He's like, after what, we've been through and everything, it's going to be you versus me. And it basically, the referee's unconscious, and Big Show comes down, and he hits Cena with a knockout punch, and then Punk helps the referee, and basically he pinned a knocked out Cena, but Cena kicks out, so you're like, oh no, and then Cena puts him in the STF, and that's when Big Show attacks Cena again, resulting in a DQ, and Cena won, but Punk retains. And that's when The Rock runs down to save Cena and attack the Big Show, but when The Rock goes for the people's elbow, listen to me, elbow, Punk re-enters the ring and just
I like that. That actually sounds
out.
Better. The people's elbow.
The people's elbow, yeah, right. The helper elbow. So The Rock gets taken down. The fans are just blindsided by this. No, our favorite face, the one man that we cannot, get behind enough, he turned heel, and my God, was he villainous. So this was a great chance for him to turn, and made their rivalry even more interesting because we knew Punk has the title. The Rock, he's not exactly greatness personified, but he is truly living up to his namesake, an immovable object. Whoever held the title at the, by the time they got to the Royal Rumble, then they'd be facing The Rock. So whatever man held the title, would face The Rock. And The Rock goes ahead and he essentially gets beaten, but then restarts the match and says it's not going to end that way. And The Rock pins CM Punk and takes his title. So now it seems like it's going to be just Rock versus Cena, face versus face. And one final match between these two at this point in time. So now we're at
no lifetime.
Exactly. We're at, Raw 2013, February 25th. And John Cena, CM Punk, they give them over 30 minutes here. I mean, it was just an amazing main event. And it was just very unfortunate that they couldn't have put CM Punk into the Mania main event by adding him as a triple threat for this or anything. But basically, they let it show that it was Punk's frustration that got the better of him. And every time he went and put on a series of covers on Cena, like basically in this state of disbelief, like how much more do I have to do to pin you? He wasted too much time. And that's when the attitude adjustment was enough to put Punk on his back. And John Cena was heading to WrestleMania. Now, Punk did go on to face The Undertaker in a really excellent feud and match. But I think it would have been even better to not have Punk have that chip on his shoulder for all those years, waiting for his Mania main event, waiting for his time in the sun. And that was the last time we were going to see Punk for over 10 years in a WWE setting. Their match on this Raw, February 25th, 2013, was the last time we'd see them two in singles action. Now, it wasn't until the next year after the Royal Rumble that Punk left the company and would be gone for those 10 years, but him and John did not cross paths up until then. So when you look back at the amount of matches they had and the level of story told, they had about a dozen matches. So when you think of rivalries, how many times did Randy Orton and John Cena face off time and time again? And how many matches did they have? But how many of those matches just didn't matter? It was just another match. As where with CM Punk and John Cena, each time they met, it was crucial. It was at an impotence. There was a certain impact to them being in that moment. They were getting themselves over together because the story was bigger than them. And they knew it and they utilized it. The story wasn't just CM Punk winning the title. It was CM Punk leaving with the title, taking it away from Vince McMahon. And I really wish he got to go defend it at ROH. Today they'd be doing it where he would go to TNA. He'd go to, other places. But right now, this was uncharted territory, unknown waters, or vice versa. And it was a really interesting time to be a fan because you didn't know what was real, what wasn't. And they blurred the lines of that so heavily and so fantastically that it was expertly done. You didn't know if Punk was actually leaving because his contract was legitimately up. His time was up. He had been disgruntled with WWE. He had not been thrilled with everything. So was he leaving? Was he looking for greener pastures? I wish they waited a bit longer, but just going up to the 2013 time, CM Punk leads the feud with 7 wins, 6 losses, and 1 tie. He was at one point 7-2-1 in the rivalry, but Cena has won the 4 recent matches. So all in all, their rivalry is at 7-6-1 up to that point. And it makes a good deal of sense with why people are so high and find this to be such a memorable rivalry. And that is, again, the story. You had the underdog, the voice of the voiceless, the man of the people going up against Vince's chosen one, the one that Vince anointed to be the head of the company. So time and time again, fans could get behind the idea of, hey, screw the guy that gets handed everything in life while I'm over here suffering. I'm busting my ass. I'm killing myself. I'm putting on banger after banger, feud after feud. I am entertaining the masses while Cena just shows up to do his 5 moves of doom and leave. And Punk wasn't wrong. And any good villain has a good amount of, truth in their mission statement. They have to have a bit of credibility to be understood. No, they shouldn't be fully justified, but there should be some justification for their madness. I know you, my friend, was absolutely very high on this feud at this point in time, and you were equally excited to see CM Punk make his return at Survivor Series. Eventually, soon enough for SummerSlam,
Right.
you and I will be covering the guilty or guilt-free edition of both AEW and CM Punk. So seeing who's guilty or guilt-free there with their relationship and how that all turned out. But you had said before, this was one of your favorite points in times and one of the things you look forward to the most. And this is what got me really full-time back into wrestling, because I was watching around 2010 times, not as avid. I wasn't watching Raw week to week. I was basically like, hey, let's check out what the pay-per-view is. And really, I was sticking to like the big four, the SummerSlams, the Rumbles, the Survivor Series, and Mania. I wasn't overly worried about the week to week. And the Money in the Bank time, I remember I was like, oh, I'm going to pay for the pay-per-view. I am going to, so that I had people over. We all watched Money in the Bank together because we didn't know, would Cena finally lose? Was Super Cena going to be taken down a peg? Or was CM Punk really going to leave with that title? And that's what he did. He blew, Vince McMahon a kiss and he walked out. I'm curious, though, what made this rivalry so special to you?
I just think they were just two masters on the microphone.
Absolutely.
In-ring chemistry, they didn't need a lot of matches to prove that. I just think it was just how they're two of the best in the history on the microphone. That's a fact.
Absolutely.
And what would you say stands out to you with them?
Each time they met, it felt must see. Even when it came down to, not talking about Money in the Bank, but like Night of Champions 2012, Punk's out there with Heyman. And even though it ends in a draw, it was like, we have to see what happens here. I have to know how this turns out. And basically, it ended in a double pin that night. So Punk retained the title, and then, Punk attacked Cena afterwards. It was a great moment. But again, it was must see. And that pretty much exemplifies this storied rivalry. It was must see. Even when everything else was great going on, it was these two that brought your eyes to the product. It was these two that made you look to the future and say, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. And at a time where wrestling was floundering and it was just filled with a lot of the same old characters, now this was truly, something fans could sink their teeth into. Since then, Punk was away for WWE for just a little bit under or over 10 years. And in that meantime, he went back to wrestling at AEW about 3 years back. We know how that turned out. People feared for their lives. Jungle Boy had to be goozled. And Punk was basically escorted, handheld right back into WWE's open arms. And it was in that point in time where Punk made his voice known for how many issues he had with WWE and how just distasteful and disrespected and awful a lot of the things were towards him. One of his outstanding comments that people still quote today, and it is relevant as of now, is when he criticized WWE for bringing their product to Saudi Arabia. And during the COVID times, he said, go suck a blood money covered dick in Saudi Arabia, you fucking dork, talking to The Miz. He was always outspoken. He spoke about how Susan G. Coleman's, charity was a scam, and WWE had a very big relationship with them. It is something to see. So now knowing that we're getting one more match, one more time, basically John knew. He when we got Punk back, we saw how things were progressing and how excellent his run has been since he returned with the company. It really has been just top freaking notch.
Yep.
So we start off with these two. They get their little nods and back and forths, but Punk's injured in the Rumble and John's not there at that point. So they see each other, they talk, they share some quick moments of respect, but the first time they actually get to go ahead and face each other off is in the Royal Rumble this past year, 2025. And it would come down to John Cena and Jey Uso, and 4 letters, 1 word, yeet. Jey Uso beat John Cena for the Rumble, and that leads John declaring for the Elimination Chamber just by his own merit and history. Punk actually qualifies by wrestling and competes and earns a spot. And after the 4 men, so Logan Paul, Drew McIntyre, Damian Priest, and Seth Rollins have been taken out, Seth, being an egotistical son of a bitch who's just marred with jealousy and always about vengeance, hits Punk with the frickin' stomp. And that's when John locks on the STF, says, "I'm sorry" to Punk, and watches him fade. So John goes ahead that night. He wins the #1 contendership to take on Cody Rhodes. He ends up turning heel by attacking Cody, as we've covered much on this channel before. And that sends the wheels going forward. So now we're going to have champion John Cena, who won the belt from Cody at WrestleMania 41 this past year. Now we're seeing him defend the title against good guy CM Punk. And they've always been a mirror image of one another. So now the parallels are there. John is recreating, or at least embodying, what Punk was as a heel. They're cutting the same style promos, saying the same type of things. And now you have Punk defending the company, defending the honor, defending each other. And it's certainly a very exciting premise. Knowing that the one thing Punk did not want to do was go to Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure he could have, outside of storyline, he could say no. But I'm sure they dumped a dump truck worth of money up to his front door for this. And he was on the marketing weeks ago. They had him in the marketing, and fans were bitching online, being like, "Oh, well, how could you have him featured in the marketing for anything to do with Saudi? Night of Champions being over there, Punk's not going to go." And so they removed him from the marketing. But yet, I think they did this in probably the slyest and best way possible. You had John go ahead and slyly say, "Hey, if you're going to face me, then you're going to do it on my terms and when I say." And that's going to be at Night of Champions in Saudi Arabia. John smirked right before he delivered that line. He said, "You're going to have to follow me to Saudi Arabia." I mean, that's evil. That is diabolical. Choosing Saudi Arabia as a place to give Punk the opportunity is the ultimate heel move from Cena. And that's why I was so high. Yeah, I was so high on this drama, because the heel turn from John has not been great. But the storytelling levels here, and that's what they've done for hardcore and more less casual fans, people that are watching everything and consuming everything. They've been adding in winks and nods for people that follow the product as consistently as we tend to. They're saying like, "Hey, you guys know that Punk hates Saudi, and that's obviously what he doesn't feel comfortable doing, and John's forcing him to." The fans that don't know about the blood-covered, dick-sucking comment, it doesn't affect them at all. All it is, "Hey, John said, I'm not going to wrestle you tonight. I'll do it at the big PLE." So fans not in the know are just like, all right, they're going to face each other. But fans in the know see the layers to it, the levels of stories, the ogre and onions comparison. There's so much more. So much for Saudi Arabia being evil. Now people are loving the fact that they're turning Punk's Saudi hate into a story. And it lowers the impact of Punk going there and feeling like a hypocrite. So WWE themselves booked this in the best way possible, while continuing with their rivalry, just with parallels and shades of opposites of what they were before. You said it so, poignantly yourself before. They didn't have many matches. I brought up the comparison of Edge and Cena, of Cena and Orton, where they've had match after match after match. But when it came to CM Punk, when it came to these two, less was more. They knew that when it was time for them to deliver, they were going to knock it out of the park. Whatever sports analogy you want, home run, slam dunk, they got it. They knew it. They had the audience hook, line, and sinker, because you had, as you said, two of the best people on the mic, two of the best workers on the mic. scathing promos cut against each other. And now that the roles have been reversed, it is a refresh that we didn't expect we'd get, that we're all loving. No one expected a heel Cena and face CM Punk to be what we're getting this year. But guess what? That's what happened, and I'm all here for it. So looking back at their true history and their storied rivalry, it's incredible that they were able to make as gigantic of a lasting impact as they had off of as little work as they had done with each other. When you look at like the grand scheme of things, typically, you know, when you see somebody face another person for a rivalry, they have rematch after rematch and then all the stipulation matches. And we really didn't get that with these two. You'd sometimes get a rematch here or there, but mostly it was John and Punk face to face, center of the ring, battling it out over gigantic stakes or something of great importance. You know, if it wasn't the superstar of the year, if it wasn't for a title, then there was something else on the line. But they made it matter.
Yep.
Absolutely. And the intrigue is still there. And what's great about this rivalry, I mean, Punk's always been vocal about his tense relationship with Saudi. And I mean, you figure they would have had this match. Why not have it at Money in the Bank or SummerSlam? You figure that's a lineup that makes sense to everybody. But no, the story to this here is even better. The evilness of John Cena to go after him and tell him, you know, this is how we're going to change the culture, you know, and he brings back, you know, eyes and shots to the infamous tweet that Punk put out. But like John said, you're going to follow me to Saudi Arabia. And you could see the expression on Punk's face change immediately. And he admitted, like, yeah, the title corrupted me. I don't want this title back. I didn't for a long time because I was afraid of what it did to me, and I didn't want to become that again. And seeing what it's done to you is what happened to me. I know this isn't you. And he's like, you said I'm sorry before you finished me off. So therefore, the good John is still in there somewhere deep down. So all the levels of storytelling they're giving us here only adds to the wrestling. You know, when it comes down to it, it is still wrestling. They're going to be facing off each other in the ring, but making us care, making us say, why? How dare you? Why would you do, you know, giving us that ability to have compassion for somebody while being so passionate about somebody else is incredible. And that's the thing I love about wrestling. That, you know, it's all a matter of perspective. We brought it up before, the blind man, you know, the blind men and the elephant. They each touch a different part of the elephant and describe the thing differently. It's all a matter of, you know, perspective. It's all subjective. How do you see it? People might see Punk as the bad guy here. People might see, you know, again, it's how you interpret the story. And that's always what's shined for me in wrestling, leaving it up to the fans. I know you're very excited.
Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
I love this rivalry, and I think I'll be excited for this because especially the roles are reversed now.
Absolutely.
This is just going to be perfect.
Absolutely. So going through their history and everything we've seen of these two, it only adds to the weight and magnitude that will be their Night of Champions match. You know, we all think that, hey, Punk has no chance here. He's going to lose, but we don't know what the future holds. I doubt John loses here, but you never know. I mean, it's CM Punk. It's in Saudi. They could try and do something shocking and tell a different story. They've pivoted quite a few times now. And although it's pretty well known that Triple H doesn't like to have the fans hijack his booking, a la R-Truth, it's still very, very intriguing knowing how hard-fisted and heavy-handed they're going with this. You know, that they're going to make sure that everybody tunes in for the last time of CM Punk and John Cena. So I love their history. I love their feud. And I love his response as well. Punk said, I don't hate coming to Saudi because I've never been to Saudi. And thankfully now it's become with Saudi Arabia more about family and the kids over there seeing it. You know, when we first started the Saudi Arabia adventure over there, It was a disaster because you had, just the men in the traditional garb sitting in sofas, not emoting at all. They weren't smiling, they weren't laughing, they weren't clapping, nothing. It was just dead silence and very awkward for a wrestling show. But now you see all the kids in there, all the families, people making memories. So again, it's just like when they do an overseas tour. This is just another stop on that. That's the way you have to look at it. Keep your politics out of it and just do it to entertain people. Simple as that.
Yep.
All in all, though, I cannot wait to see what happens at Night of Champions. We will be live that evening to go ahead and cover all the results of that card. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're hitting the bell so you know when we'll be live or putting out the next bit of content. Cody, tell these amazing people where they can find you, my friend.
You can find me over on my Twitter or X, whatever you like to call it nowadays, at Judgment Day Era. And you can find me over on my Instagram at Cody_Onidi_316.
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter, on Rumble, on Instagram at Countdown Ended. All of my DMs are open, so feel free to message me with any ideas, criticisms, thoughts, concerns, whatever you have. Let us know. And again, we'll be putting out another episode of Guilty or Guilt-Free. That'll be up this weekend as well, so make sure you're keeping an eye out for that. Thank you to all of you that have helped build us up to almost 8,000 subscribers. We're over 7,600 at this point, which is truly humbling and incredible. So I can't thank you all enough. I hope everyone stays sexy. Have a great day, and we'll catch you all soon.
Yep.